So, what's the plan?
Right. Welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where we'll review Shaun of the Dead, talk some spoilers, rank the film to remember, and then have a nice cold pint and wait for all of this to blow over. How's that for a slice of fried gold?
Yeah, boy!
Great job, everybody.
We did it.
I'm so proud of us. Great job.
Okay, that's the end of the podcast. Bye.
It's that easy.
We are, of course, the Remember the Film podcast, and this week
we are Remember the Film.
We are Remember the Film, yes. And this week we're talking about Shaun of the Dead, the first film in the Cornetto trilogy by Edgar Wright, and one of my favorite. I think it's my favorite comedy of all time, to be honest.
You just added it to your. You just added it to your letterboxd top 4.
I added it back to my top 4. I kicked it out a few months ago, but on this rewatch, I was like, fine, look, I love Star Wars, but I don't need to have Empire Strike Back on my top 4. I have plenty of Star Wars movies on my top 50. I have a top 150 list. I have plenty of Star Wars movies there. I think my top 4 needs more variety.
So did you kick it out for Star Wars before?
No, it was Mulholland Drive that jumped in there.
Okay.
Yeah, before.
So Shaun of the Dead was unseated by Mulholland Drive, but then on his most recent rewatch, Shaun of the Dead, unseated Empire Strikes Back.
Unseated Empire Strikes Back,
okay.
Yes.
Cool.
But that being said, I have like 10 movies that I consider my favorites. It's kind of hard to really split hairs between them.
The letterboxd top
That's
4 is a big
issue.
Yeah,
4 is a small number. I always say they should be 5, but I understand that it makes sense for the format.
But if you made it 5, then
we're getting really into the weeds of letterboxd. We're getting really into the weeds on letterboxd. So I'm Hugo Pinay. My usual co-hosts are Josh Bradley and Jeff Chris Ulrich.
Hello.
How are you guys doing?
We're
Pretty
doing
good.
Great, buddy.
Yeah. I can talk about letterboxd top 4s. I set mine when I made my account in 2013 and haven't touched it since, so I should probably look at that again, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you should.
I imagine it's probably Coen Brothers heavy.
It is. Yes.
Probably.
It's reflecting the taste of a 23-year-old, not a 31-year-old. So.
So what are we talking about?
So we're talking about Shaun of the Dead this week. It'll be our film to remember, and we'll get really into the weeds of all the stupid and amazing jokes in this movie. But before we do that, I just wanted to have like a very quick segment on Edgar Wright. I think he's one of the most exciting directors that's working right now. Right now, at this point, he's been working for almost 20 years. But he's only made 5 feature films, if you don't count whatever, A Fistful of Fingers, which is kind of the no-budget film that he made when he was 20 years old, which you can if you want, but professionally, I would say that he's only made 5 films. And, I mean, they're all so cool and have their own unique style, and I think just him in general is such a unique voice, especially because I love that he's making these mid-budget popcorn movies, because they're action movies, they're comedies. Scott Pilgrim is whatever you want to call it. It's kind of a mixture of genres, but he is making popcorn movies at that mid tier that we don't really see anymore. So I really love his stuff. Sure. How do you guys feel about his movies?
I think they're great. I know that a lot of people like his movies. Can we talk about, is there a director whose reputation has been better helped by like a single YouTube video, like a single video essay?
What do you mean?
There's a very famous video essay on Edgar Wright from Every Frame of Painting that came out, I don't know, 10 years ago at this point. Yeah, how to do visual comedy.
So with that, here are 8 things Edgar Wright does with picture and sound that I want to see other comedy filmmakers try out.
I feel like I didn't know much about Edgar Wright or like think much of him until that came out and like swept some corners of the internet, and now like me and a lot of other people who hang out in those corners of the internet like have a pretty great appreciation of Edgar Wright just purely based on one video essay. I don't know, maybe it's just a impetus to reevaluate his work and how it
But also, like, because to be fair, 4 of his 5 movies are relatively, you can call them cult classics, but they're not like big box office movies that everybody has seen or whatever. Like, the movie that really broke out was Baby Driver.
Well, and also, like, Baby Driver is the movie of his that came out after that video essay came out, not to, like, put too fine a point on it. Like, like, people became aware of him, I think, because that got maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on it, but, like, it got millions of views, and suddenly people are talking about these cult movies that no one really saw at the time, but now like they realized, oh wait, these are actually great.
So, like, I'm trying to go back and put myself in the mindset of, 2004, which obviously that was a very long time ago for us now. But I seem to remember everyone talking about Shaun of the Dead. I think cult classic is a great, way to describe it. But I feel like it was pretty big even in the moment, because I know, like, I'm not a horror guy, but I was very cognizant of Shaun of the Dead at the time it was released, because people were talking about it, because it's great. Oh, Jeff, you should check this one out because it spoofs horror, so it's really not that scary. So you'll probably like it. And I'll be like, no, I don't like horror. I'm not going to see it. And of course, I was very dumb.
As college kids are. I'm in university, by the way.
I had definitely heard of it too, but I think that the reason people were talking about it at the time is because Dawn of the Dead, the Zack Snyder movie, had just come out a year earlier, and
actually, it released. I think it released a few weeks. They released a few weeks apart. I think studio, Universal bought the international distribution rights for Shaun of the Dead, which was, I think, it was originally made with Studio Canal, but then, which is a European studio, as you think French, and Universal bought the rights, but I think the way that they did it is we're only buying the rights if we're able to also buy Dawn of the Dead, and we're going to play them very close to each other, because they're both, because in their minds it was like, oh, they're both probably B tier zombie movies, and we're just going to kind of put them out in the summer and see if they can do some business. They're relatively low budget, so it shouldn't be a problem. Could not be more different, the two movies.
Yes, right. I just looked it up. You're right. They actually came out within a month of each other. So you're exactly right. But like, but there's also like, in the early to mid 2000s, like we're still kind of in the wake of spoof movies, like Scary Movie, etc. So like the fact that there was a comedy called Shaun of the Dead coming out within a few weeks of a very straight horror movie called Dawn of the Dead, like that was a reason to talk about Shaun of the Dead, but as it just like in the context of like Scary Movie and Scary Movie 2 and 3, which like kind of, I think does a disservice to Shaun of the Dead personally, but that might have been, that's probably why I'd heard of it, is because people kind of just assumed it was like that and categorized it in that way.
I think it's funny that, this conversation we're having right now sparked a memory of mine where I distinctly remember talking with someone about these movies coming out, and I was like, is Shaun of the Dead a spoof of this movie that just came out? Like, that's really quick turnaround, right? Of course,
maybe not. It was also, that movie was also already a remake.
Already a remake.
Yeah, exactly.
Of classic. Yeah. So not a huge surprise. But
so we're gonna get into some boilerplate stuff for Shaun of the Dead.
Hang on.
In a minute, but I just wanted to. I was just want to continue, get back on track on the Edgar Wright stuff.
Okay, cool.
Like, what's your favorite movie by him? What's your least favorite? What do you like? Not like? Are you looking forward to the next one?
I didn't get to say, what my take on Edgar Wright was.
Yes, go ahead.
I am a fan now. I didn't watch any of his movies at the time they were released. They were all like I saw all of them. I haven't seen World's End yet, but I saw every one of the ones I have seen. The other 4 was years after they were made. I don't know why. I know why the delay on Shaun of the Dead, but Hot Fuzz, I don't know. Maybe I chose not to watch Hot Fuzz because I hadn't seen Shaun of the Dead. Some stupid thing like that.
Maybe.
But I've enjoyed all of his movies. They're very well made, and I think like the video essay points out, the best thing about it is the visual comedy, the way shots are set up to, there's humor in the dialogue, but there's also humor in everything that's happening in the frame. Sort of like when we talked about Ferris Bueller, there's a lot of stuff happening in the backgrounds of shots that is, it's not necessarily going to be laugh out loud funny every time, but it's going to put a smirk on your face, so you're always enjoying the movie. There's always something happy going on.
A lot of background stuff in Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
And I think at the script level, you're not laughing out loud all the time, but I think it always catches me off guard how clever a lot of the lines are.
It's very clever, yeah.
It's very smartly written.
Yeah, I think this also is like structured pretty well too. There's a great video. So Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright co-wrote this together. I think they also co-wrote Hot Fuzz together. And you can find videos online of what they call their flip chart, where the two of them have like this big like poster board basically that has like flip the pages over, so it's like basically like a legal pad, except it's huge, like several feet big. And they put it on an easel, and like they'll walk you through like their flip chart for how they conceived of Shaun of the Dead and how they conceived of Hot Fuzz, and like basically their writing process. And it's really interesting to see like how much thought went into it. I mean, I think you can tell how much thought went into it because they're very cleverly written, both dialogue-wise and structure-wise. But like the flip chart videos, I think the Shaun of the Dead one's like 10 minutes long, and you can find it on YouTube, and the Hot Fuzz one's like 15 minutes long, and you can find it on YouTube. And it's really fun to see them like talk through their process and what they're thinking as they're writing it.
So let's get into the actual movie.
We didn't actually answer your last question, which is what is our favorite Edgar Wright movies. So I just wanted to shout out my favorite Edgar Wright movie is Baby Driver, and with the caveat of now, like obviously there's issues with the actors now, but from the actual movie itself, I love Baby Driver. It's so fun. It's basically like a music video combined with an action
movie,
film, and the way they sync everything up is it's so engaging for me start to finish. So that's why I love Baby Driver, but I also really love Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz. What about you, Josh?
I can't believe I haven't said it yet. My favorite Edgar Wright movie by far is Scott Pilgrim. Like I love Scott Pilgrim, and I've seen that more than any of his other movies by a long shot. Like this is only, I think, my second or third time seeing Shaun of the Dead. I think I've only seen Hot Fuzz once. I've seen it World's End once. Seen Baby Driver once, but like I've seen Scott Pilgrim, I don't know, 10 times. I love Scott Pilgrim. And
I completely agree.
So, just saying, you need to watch Hot Fuzz again.
I know I do.
In the same way as Shaun of the Dead, there's so much foreshadowing callbacks in the movie that the more times you watch it, the better it gets. It's just like you notice little details, and it's like, oh my god, I can't believe I didn't see it the last time. Every time you watch it.
You just put Shaun of the Dead in your top 4 on Letterboxd. I'm assuming you like it more than Hot Fuzz, but I feel like Hot Fuzz might be more beloved than Shaun of the Dead, possibly.
I think it might be.
Yeah.
Just because I think Hot Fuzz doubles down on just the structural cleverness that they do, and the returning jokes, and like the thing where an element is planted at the beginning of the movie and then it comes back in the middle and then it comes back at the end. It's so perfectly structured. But for me, Shaun of the Dead kind of also has an element of I don't know. I'll say this later, but I feel like it's kind of an underrated little indie character drama that I don't think Hot Fuzz
got a lot of heart. Yeah.
So I think it gets me in with that, and also I just think it being in the horror genre just makes it funnier.
So I just wanted to say I pulled up my Letterboxd. I've seen 4 of Edgar Wright's 5 films, and 3 of them I've rated 4.5 stars. So like they're really good movies.
They're all really good. Yeah, he's great. Okay, so Shaun of the Dead, released in 2004, as we said. It was directed by Edgar Wright, and who also co-wrote the film with Simon Pegg, who also stars in the film as Shaun, of course. The idea for Shaun of the Dead was developed because of their mutual love, but mainly because of their mutual love of George A. Romero's movies. He's also obviously the director who's credited as kind of being the pioneer of the zombie genre. He made Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. Then he made a bunch of other movies, but those 3 are the ones that really have a cult following. Of course, Dawn of the Dead, Shaun of the Dead, that's the pun, and maybe the reason why the movie didn't get as much credit when it was released, because it's kind of a dumb pun if you consider what the movie is, but there you go. It also kind of developed on ideas that they had while they were doing Spaced. Spaced is a British sitcom that they did together. It was directed by Edgar Wright, and Simon Pegg was the main character in it. And there was an episode where Pegg's character basically spent all night getting high and playing Resident Evil 2. And he hallucinated this scene where he himself had a gun and was fighting zombies. So, and basically that episode was written with this idea of, we've seen so many zombie movies made in America. What would the British reaction, because it's such a different culture, what would the British reaction be to a zombie apocalypse, and how can we make it funny? That was what they wanted to do.
Are they playing Resident Evil in the movie?
No, they're not.
Okay, just checking.
No, they're playing
there's
some shooter, and I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, there's a first person shooter that kind of is a callback.
No, Resident Evil is much slower paced, of course. But
And it's a
what was I saying?
third-person game. God.
Whatever. Yeah. The characters of Shaun and Ed were also heavily based on Simon Pegg and Nick Frost's friendship. Like they were kind of in that at that point in their lives where they were living together, they were kind of slackers, sitting around playing video games all day, and so the movie was also kind of a reflection of their personal lives. Other inspirations that they cited for this movie, I thought that this might be interesting, and were films like The Birds by Hitchcock, Back to the Future, and Raising Arizona, which I thought was interesting. The movie made $30 million, which on a budget of $6 million, and considering it was kind of a smaller production, didn't really have a lot of budget for marketing, is kind of a good sum. And it even got 2 BAFTA nominations, including Outstanding British Films, with it unfortunately lost. I wondered what should have checked.
That's a good nomination to get.
Yeah,
I'll look up what it lost to.
at the BAFTA. Considering the small kind of film that it is, and also the genre that it's playing in, it's kind of cool.
It is very British, so maybe it earns points for
British.
being very British.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. And actually, we'll have more on that in a minute. Some interesting. I also found some interesting opinions on the movie. Roger Ebert. We often kind of cite him because one of the best critics of all time, most famous critics of all time. He loved the film despite being kind of tired of the zombie genre, and he wrote that the film, instead of focusing on the undead and trying to get the laughs there, it treats the living characters as sitcom regulars whose conflicts and arguments keep getting interrupted by annoying flesh eaters. And I think that's a really good way of putting it. With this film, because the film is essentially kind of a little character comedy, and it's about the interactions between the characters, and the zombie apocalypse just happens to be in the way a lot of the time. Which is funny. He also specifically praised Bill Nye's performance, which I thought was interesting.
He's also great in this, yeah.
Yeah.
BAFTAs, real quick. It lost Outstanding British Film to My Summer of Love, which I've never heard of.
Sure.
And it lost Outstanding Debut by a British writer, director, producer to A Way of Life, which I've also never heard of. So
there you go.
So he didn't get the awards, but he's won in the long run.
Yes,
probably
for sure. George A. Romero himself really liked the movie, to the point that he even called Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg and gave them a cameo as like 2 prominent zombies in his next movie, Land of the Dead from 2005. Not as critically acclaimed, but fun fact. Tarantino also talked about this movie. He described it as one of his top 20 films made after 1992. So he made a list of the movies that have been made since I started directing movies, and he put it in his top 20. And finally, speaking of British, in 2016, the magazine Empire, website, magazine, whatever, made a list of the 100 best British films of all time, and put Shaun of the Dead in the list at number 6. So very high on the list. Yes, it's the most recent movie on that list, and they kind of have a little entry for each movie on the list, and they called it the best horror comedy ever made, right up there with Evil Dead 2 by Sam Raimi, which is great company. Interesting enough, it is the most recent film on the top 10. And number 1 on that list is last week's film to remember, Lawrence of Arabia.
So are they ranking these movies on how British they are?
I don't think so, because otherwise, I'm sure there's more British movies. The film would eventually become the first entry in what is called the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy, with Hot Fuzz and The World's End. Each movie has a different color of cornetto, which has something to do with the movie. So it's red here for the blood, it's blue in Hot Fuzz because it's a cop movie, and it's green in The World's End because it has to do with aliens. No spoilers, just saying.
Kind of spoilers, but not really.
Kinda, but I mean, come on. The World's End. You can guess there's something going on. Sorry, Jeff. The reason the cornetto made it into the movie, though, is not really planned at all. It was just Edgar Wright's hangover remedy was having a cornetto in the movie in the morning. So it just happened to be in the movie, and then they capitalized on it by making it a little in-joke. final fun fact, because I just thought that this was really sweet and wholesome. Most of the extras in the movie that play zombies are spaced fans. Pegg and Wright, while they were making the movie, they put out a call. People, if you're a fan of Spaced, do you want to be in this movie as a zombie? And a lot of people showed up. So a lot of the extras they recruited them that way. There's also some cameos, like Chris Martin from Coldplay plays a zombie. In one scene, Edgar Wright himself plays a zombie, but most of them were just fans. So what's the premise of the movie? The premise of the movie is that Shaun is this 29-year-old guy who's kind of stuck in life. He's kind of apathetic, doesn't really have a plan for the future. He's kind of
Arrested Development.
Yeah, he's kind of working in this dead-end job, and he lives together with Pete, one of his college friends, who is kind of advancing, who's kind of more with it, if you want to say. He has a plan for his future. And Ed, who is on the opposite side. He's even more kind of a slacker than him. He's kind of sells a bit of weed to bring some money in the house, but he kind of basically sits around and plays video games all day.
He's Sean's friend from primary school, so he's kind of like keeping Sean in that,
in that
mindset, more or
sort
less.
of mindset or ruts.
Yeah.
And basically, it's not really explained how it happens. I think there's some dialogue on the TV. They think some virus or some stuff happened, but they're
breezing through it, basically you don't hear the whole news.
A zombie apocalypse starts happening in London. At least we only see London, but it does happen all over Britain, because we do see some stuff on TV, but we're not sure about the rest of the world, but it doesn't matter. And we kind of go through a few days of Sean's life dealing with the beginning of the zombie apocalypse, and how it affects his relationships and stuff. But the movie really, as I said before, is very much about the different relationships and how kind of this apocalyptic situation has to do with their relationships. And, just it's funny as shit. Like, it's so funny all of the time. Like, I don't want to make it look too serious. It's so funny.
We should also mention, he's got a relationship with his girlfriend that, isn't really progressing as quickly as she would like, because they've been together for a while, but she hasn't met his mom, etc.
It's also in Arrested Development. The relationship isn't growing the same way that Sean isn't growing.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it in a minute, because I know, Josh, you love opening images, I think the opening scene in this movie is so perfect. It's it sets up all of the dynamics that we're going to see throughout the movie.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the opening image and the opening scene.
So the opening scene is just Sean's face, and we see him talking to Liz, the girlfriend, who's kind of telling him all the stuff that we're saying. He's like, "Oh, Sean, we're stuck. We're not doing anything. We're always at this pub with your friend." And then it's not that I don't like you, Ed. And the camera whip pans, and you see Ed. And then a second later, it's Sean's turn to talk, and he's always like, "Oh, but you always make me hang out with your friends." It's not that I don't like you guys, and the camera whip pans to the other guys. So it's kind of showing this relationship visually with both Ed and David and Di, who are Liz's flatmates, in the middle of the relationship, and how, on the one hand, they are kind of pushing her to expect almost too much from Sean, and on the other hand, Ed is kind of holding him back and just, leading a kind of a shitty lifestyle for a 30-year-old.
The opening image specifically is on Simon Pegg's face, kind of staring off, looking kind of horrified.
Dumbfounded, I would say.
Yes, he takes up his beer, and the reason he's looking horrified, dumbfounded, is because Liz is trying to have a serious conversation about hey, get your life together. Yeah. I'm sick of this Arrested Development, basically. Mm-hmm. Not to keep using the same word, but basically trying to call him to action, to instead of inaction, which is kind of what the movie is him taking action as opposed to inaction.
Yeah, I think it's a great scene.
And I love that song too. That music cue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Well, no, not that one. I mean the
the one before, but then it goes.
Ghost Town is the name of the song.
Yeah. So that's the kind of the story premise and where the movie begins. So just to be, I think the most fun way to talk about this movie is kind of to go through the plot and talk about the funniest parts, the most interesting parts, how we feel about the stuff. But before we get into that, I just wanted to ask you guys what your just general opinion on the movie is. And I just wanted to talk about some more general stuff. Like, for example, for me, I think it's really interesting how this movie is so sure of itself from a writing and directorial stylistic standpoint, considering it's basically a debut feature. It's trying stuff. It's doing all the really interesting quick cutting that, Edgar Wright is famous for. They do so much foreshadowing in the dialogue. Every line is so clever and comes back in some interesting way. So just your general thoughts on the movie and some of that stuff.
It's visually engaging, obviously.
Yes,
and that
all of the time, yeah.
is a thing that Edgar Wright, I mean, it's clear that's the best thing about his directing is the way everything is set up. You are constantly being drawn in, whether it's the snap cuts to, for a different character, or the snap zooms onto an item or things like that. It's definitely visually stimulating. I appreciate that this, like you said, this is a character story about their relationships. And there's a zombie apocalypse happening.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this movie enjoyable for me, because like I've said 1,000 times, I'm not really a big horror fan. But this movie, like, the horror is just so not like it's not really a horror movie at all. It's 100% a comedy, and I love every minute of it. It's so funny. I love British humor. I love that, I don't need to be laugh out loud. Like, I don't need jokes. I like that I'm smirking though the whole time, and this movie delivers that.
I think that's a good way to put it. That I'm also smirking the whole time, even if I'm not. I mean, I'm laughing out loud at a lot of stuff, but like it just like kind of puts me in a great mood.
Yeah,
watching it. I think and it's just good vibes. And to your point about it not being a horror movie, I think it's a comedy movie with a horror premise. Like,
sure.
This story is a horror story, but like the movie is it's a comedy.
I just mean that like there's nothing in this movie that I think even the biggest scaredy cat in the world, which I might be in competition for,
me too,
would not find anything scary in this movie, because even
the
horror, the scariest bits are played for a laugh.
Yes.
So that's why I can't really think of it as a horror movie, because it nothing horrifies me.
Yeah. And I also really enjoy how much of the comedy is visual, and like also how much like thought was put into how to stage certain sequences. Like I love the sequence where he goes to and from the shop the 2 times he does it, and like the contrast there, like that's really good.
Especially with all the stuff happening in the background of those shots.
Exactly. Yes.
It also, in terms of it being a horror movie, it's I think it's a lot of fun how it does have moments where it kind of builds up tension. For example, when they're calling Barbara on the phone, there's like that very tense moment. Like there's music rising up. Mom, have you been bitten? No, it's Philip. And he's like, oh, okay. It's always like the tension is always broken, usually with a joke. And there are a few like really funny jump scares. They are jump scares, but they're played for comedy. And I think it kind of like this stupid little jump scares. Like there's one that I'm thinking of that I can't remember, but even the bathroom with the mirror where he closes the mirror and the character is there, but it's always played mostly for comedy. There's some fun gore though in the movie, at least. So if you're into that side of the horror,
that is the one thing that I think you could say is part of the horror genre that this does. There is some significant gore, but even the gore is humorous.
Funny. Yeah, it's very funny. So for me, as I said before, the aspect of the movie that kind of elevates it beyond just being, again, one of the funniest movies you can watch. What really elevates it is that it's kind of secretly like this really cool indie drama about a character and how he has to deal with his own inaction by kind of taking charge of his life. And like the zombie apocalypse is the kind of the reason why he's able to do that. So it's always played in this absurd world and it's very funny, but it like that character arc from the beginning to end, I think, is really consistent and really good. And in the first half of the movie, you see all of his shortcomings and then he has to overcome every single one of them in order to grow.
I don't know if we should call it like a
Not a
indie drama. I mean,
No,
it has a character arc. It has a good character
Yes.
arc, and most comedies don't. So like,
Yes.
that's what it is though. It's like a comedy that actually like put thought into the characters and like how they change.
It is,
So I guess
drama in the
compared
sense
to other
of
comedies, but
Yeah.
it has the kind of character arc you might expect to find in a movie that's more serious than this, I guess you could say. But like that's what I like about it, is it's still funny and still a genre, but like also, you know, at the heart, it's about this guy and him getting, you know, changing to, you know, for what he needs, getting what he needs.
We'll talk about it in the spoiler section, but there are 2 or 3 really good, like, quiet, heartwarming, or even sad character moments, emotional moments that, like, I don't know, give it something more than it just being really funny and really boring.
it has those moments, and that's where I think you're talking about the drama part of it. Is that like it has those moments where like you've been laughing, you've been, you know, smirking to yourself the whole time, but then they hit you with a moment where you're just kind of like, "Aw."
Oh, yeah.
So it's not necessarily gonna make you start tearing up. Although I will say there are moments that get close to that. But it is certainly more heartwarming in parts than you would expect from an action comedy.
The last thing I want to say before we get into spoilers is there's kind of a criticism that I've seen, like just looking online, looking at stuff about this movie. I've seen one of the criticisms that you do find is that the first 40 minutes where you build up to the moment where the zombie apocalypse actually happens and in the very beginning is the strongest part of the movie. And then kind of the climax is a little less interesting. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I'd probably agree with that. I think I like the first half of the movie more than the second half.
Yeah.
I don't know. That might just be a taste thing, though.
Yeah, and I guess for me, the part that I would resonate with that comment is that I have a hard time pegging what the climax of the movie is. Like I know that there's definitely a moment where there's a lot more action happening, but I actually don't know like if the action climax matches the narrative climax. So yeah, I don't know. Like the narrative climax being where he has finally become, you know, an adult.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in spoilers then.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I love this movie, but I do see how kind of the first half is so smart and so clever and so well constructed that, you know, as the movie progresses, it does at some point become, oh, this is a payoff to something we've already seen and it's really cool, but the like if it wasn't for all that setup that came before, it wouldn't be possible. So, but still, I think it's great. So I think we should just go through the plot and kind of talk through the movie and kind of stop me anytime to talk about what we find really funny or good or whatever about the film. So cool. Spoilers from here on out. So we've talked about the opening scene and kind of after that, the opening scene ends with Shaun sort of promising again to Liz that, oh yes, I will make more an effort. What would you like to do? What she says, oh, I want to do something. I don't want to be all so. Oh, okay, let's go. It's our anniversary coming up. Let's go on a very nice dinner. So we see him then the morning after, waking up, going to work.
Waking up, going downstairs, trying to play video games with his buddy.
Video games with Ed, and here is where we're introduced to the dynamic inside the house. So we meet Pete, who shows up and is kind of Pete is kind of a dick. Like even though he is the more grown up character, he is kind of mean to Ed. Even though maybe we could understand that, oh, he's frustrated because he's been living with these people for 4 years and they haven't really shaken off of their college days.
Especially when they point out that like Ed wasn't supposed to be living there. He just showed up one day and then didn't leave.
Yeah. He doesn't even pay rent. Well, he brings a bit. He sells some weed to some kids. And, like, we get the phone conversation where he's talking about they ask him, oh, do you have something? And then it turns out that it's the kid that we meet later.
We see both ends of the phone conversation.
Yeah. It's so stupid. It's so funny. So we get all the scenes in the house, and here we were introduced to the dynamics, and for the first time we get the joke, I'm sorry, Shaun, because like Shaun goes to Ed and says, Ed, look, I know Pete is a dick to you, but could you clean up a bit? Could you tidy up a little bit? And he's like, I'm sorry, Shaun. And he's like, oh no, it's all right. No, I'm sorry, Sean. And he's farting, and
yes,
he said,
I was waiting for him to
stop
smell it.
laughing.
Yes, yes. So I mean,
it's amazing.
That's a callback later on.
Yeah.
In the opening scene, what does exacerbate mean? That's a callback later
That's
on.
another great callback.
A couple of times.
Ed playing the arcade game in the opening scene where he says "cock it." That comes back later on.
Cock it.
I have
Several
I have a list of like some callbacks. We can go through that list later in more detail, but I just wanted to mention those now because we've got
even the dialogue that they say while playing the video game is the same exact dialogue that they will say when Sean is shooting an actual gun at the end of the movie.
Correct.
So
yes, correct.
It's always happening. The scene in the toilet where we get the quick cutting of him brushing his teeth and peeing and flushing the toilet, and then he moves the mirror and Pete is there. That's the
set
same
up when
scene
you
that we'll
find
see
Pete
later.
later.
Yeah. So here is where we get that first long take from the apartment to the shop, as they call it, and we get that little jump scare of Nelson covering the newspaper. So you as the audience see the newspaper and it's like, oh, the dead are rising. So slowly you can notice that in the background we can see the apocalypse is starting to happen, but none of the characters actually notice, which is always
I love how oblivious they are.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yes. Also, on this opening long take, when he comes out of his like gate, he gets hit by a soccer ball, kicked by a kid on his street who's just like playing around, and then Sean points at him and says, "You're dead."
You're dead.
And then like 15 minutes later, we see that kid
and he's dead.
And you also did mention in the opening credits where like it shows people in London like acting very zombie-like, even though they aren't technically zombies yet. And it's a commentary on. Walking through modern life as if you were a zombie, and then like the people actually become zombies. And there also is another callback. 'Cause I believe the first image we see during the opening credits is a cart corraler at a grocery store, like collecting the carts again, kind of walking very zombie-like. And then at the end of the movie, they say that the zombies are now very
good at doing these menial tasks.
Yes.
Sean then goes to work, and the store manager is sick. Of course, you as the audience member might suspect that he's turned into a zombie. That's the reason why he's not showing up to work.
What's the name of the employee who's sick? Anybody catch it?
No, I can't remember.
Ash is feeling a bit under the weather.
Oh, that's
I have to believe that's a reference to Ash, who is the main character in the Evil Dead movies, played by Bruce Campbell. So
I can see that. Yeah, probably
that makes sense.
Probably.
Yeah, and I think I remember thinking that when I saw it, I was like, oh, I think that's an homage to something that I haven't seen yet.
Yes.
So what happens is Sean is in charge for the day, so he gives a little speech to the employees, but you can tell he has no idea what he's saying. So at the end he's like, oh, and as Ash always says, that there's no I in team, but there's an I in
meat
pie. Well, in meat pie and pie, I don't know what he's saying. And
meat is team reworked. I don't know.
It's like, yeah, it's whatever. Here we get this interaction with this 17-year-old kid who works at the store, where for me this is stating the theme of the film, because it's like the 17-year-old kid is like, oh, I know. Sean goes to him, he's like, I know you don't want to be here forever, like I get it, I have stuff that I want to do in my life. And he's just like, when? Because he's 29, like he's 29 years old. And so that is essentially the theme of the movie, is him just being stuck.
And then they also introduce another thing that's going to be called back repeatedly.
Yeah, you've got red on you.
The ink from his pen bleeds into his shirt, and you've got red on you, and that comes up like 4 or 5 more times.
Yeah, and increasingly it's more bloody.
Just inspired choice to dress Sean in a white shirt with a red tie, and then have like a red pen in his breast pocket that bleeds. Like just really good, and like iconic imagery of like him on the poster of this movie is just again just instantly iconic, and again very useful in a movie where he gets splattered with blood.
And it's a lazy cosplayer's dream,
It really is, honestly.
Yeah, like the image of him with the red hair and the red tie and the cricket bat, it's so smart.
Instantly recognizable.
Yeah. Here we get more hints where he's just kind of flipping through the TV channel, and the news are all saying, oh, there's something happening. But again, the people are just walking around completely oblivious. And then Philip shows up, and we see Bill Nighy for the first time. Do you guys want to talk about his performance? Because I think he's so deadpan that some of the funniest scenes in the movie are with him.
Also,
for me,
therefore, one of the most heartwarming scenes.
Oh yeah, one of the most heartwarming scenes,
which is only heartwarming as a result of how deadpan he is in the rest of the movie. Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, he's a very, very prominent British actor.
Yes.
Who I don't think has gotten as much acclaim in the U.S. as he probably deserves. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, I love him as Davy Jones in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Yeah,
do you fear death?
Yes, but like, do you think most people even associate that role with him because he's a tentacle
I'm
mouth?
probably in the minority. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you'd have
Jack
to know
Sparrow.
that.
Yeah.
And like, here we get his introduction where, oh, Sean, your dad is here, and he's already like, he's not my dad, he's my stepdad. Yeah. So like, there's more of their relationship there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he shows up, like, and he's facing the other way, and he just turns, and he's like, "You've got red on you." First thing he says.
Dramatic sound cue when he turns.
Yeah. And he's like, "Have you forgotten about tomorrow? What's tomorrow? Your bi-monthly visit?" I always find that line. It just gets me. So then we get another conversation between him and the kid, where the kid is annoyed at Sean. Because like, oh, you were complaining about me being on my phone, but now you're talking to your dad. How come you get to do that? And he's like, actually, he's not my dad. He's my stepdad. And believe it or not, I don't find it difficult to keep my
personal life separate.
Personal and work life separate. And then a phone jumps into the frame.
Liz for you.
Right next to him. Liz for you. And it's just so
great gag.
Stupid. It's a great gag. And so Sean is not listening to Liz, so again, he fucks up once again, and he completely forgets to book the table for the fancy restaurant they were supposed to go to. So you get the next scene where he just hasn't listened. He just goes to buy flowers. He buys flowers for his mum because, Philip has
the bi-monthly visit.
For his bi-monthly visit. And again, another scene where everyone he meets is going through life like a zombie. He's sitting in the bus, and everyone's just like kind of sitting there and be looking a little dumbfounded.
Do you know what song is playing there?
No.
Well, the title of that song is Zombie Nation.
Amazing.
Which was a very popular song in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah, and it fits. So he goes to buy flowers for his mum, and then he runs into Yvonne for the first time, who's I think an ex-girlfriend or a friend from college again. And again, another scene where the theme is stated once again. Because, like, he runs into her and she's like, "Oh, yeah, I just bought a house." And he's like, "Bought?"
Yeah. And she becomes kind of like the Deus Ex Yvonne in the movie. The Deus Ex Machina at the end of the movie.
Yeah, she's kind of the grown-up version of what Sean might have been if he wasn't such a slacker throughout his life. And she's kind of a recurring character in the movie.
And they kind of hit you in the head with that metaphor later on.
Yeah, later on. Funny scene though.
I love that bit. That's a great visual gag. Yeah,
it's so stupid, but it works for some reason.
That's gonna be the catchphrase of this episode. It's so stupid,
but it's funny.
I don't think it's that stupid. I think
Hugo said it like 7 times.
I know, but because there's something like it's not stupid, but it's silly. But it's silly in such a smart, clever way.
It's taking something that is stupid and using it in a very smart way.
Yes. So this is where Sean realizes that he hasn't called the restaurant, and he calls Liz to apologize and whatever. And he suggests the Winchester again, the pub where they always go, because like Ed suggests it while he's on the phone, and she hangs up. So he runs off to her place, and we get the whole scene in her apartment where they're just fighting, and eventually they decide to break up with one of my favorite lines in the movie, where it's like they're sitting after they've had this big fight, they're sitting on her bed, and she says, "If I don't do something, I'm going to end up into that pub every night for the rest of my life, like those saddle fuckers, drinking myself to death, wondering what the hell happened." And he's like, "What do you mean do something?" And it's hard cut to him outside of the door, crying with the flowers in his hands, and the door is just being slammed in his face. which again, another great visual gag for me.
And also good theme stated, like, Sean,
Yep.
you need to do something. And he doesn't even know what do something means, but he will
Do
soon.
something.
Soon.
Yeah.
And like the whole conversation where David and Di keep budging into their relationship, and at one point he's just like, "Will you shut up, Four Eyes?"
Yes.
Hilarious.
But also, like, you know, it's not, shouldn't be lost on anybody that, like, when she says, Sean, you need to do something, what she's saying is, you need to do something besides going to the Winchester every night.
Yeah.
And in the course of the plot, when he decides to take action and be a grown-up, his version of do something is literally take them all to the Winchester. But it's,
Yeah.
you know, to save them, you know, which is, again, ironic and funny.
After that, we get another one of the best scenes in the movie. Like, I don't know. I just love this movie so much, as every scene is one of my favorites. Where Sean and Ed meet back at the pub for, like, they're just getting drunk together because Sean is just crying. And this is one of the few scenes, because the script is very, as we said, is very specific, I would say it's airtight. Like, every line has a very specific meaning, and it will come back in a very specific way. But this scene is where they do a bit of improv, and it was if you haven't seen it, you should watch the blooper reel for this scene specifically, because the whole sequence where basically Ed explains, like, Sean explains to Ed, "Oh, she said I'm just gonna end up like those sad old fuckers drinking myself to death, wondering what the hell happened," and he said, "What? She's crazy. These are rich, interesting characters." And the whole scene where he explains who those people are, except for the owners who say, "Oh, ex-mafia, the Winchester." Like, the gun is actually a real gun. That's why it's called the Winchester. That whole scene is
Chekhov's
completely
gun.
improvised. Yes. And for most of it, Simon
It's
Pegg
just Nick
has
Frost
yeah.
pointing at people and coming
And
up with
improvising,
Coming up
what
with
the stories are.
ridiculous identities for these
absolutely
people.
ridiculous identities for these people. But Simon Pegg is just having to sit there crying, and most of it he doesn't have to laugh. So if you go and see the bloopers, it took them hours to do this scene. First, they had to do the monkey bit, which is really difficult because he just has to sit there completely shattered with tears down his face and not react at all, which seems easy, but very, very difficult.
Nick Frost
And-
does a good orangutan impression.
God, it's really good. It's like surprisingly good. And here we get another line where he describes like the following day, what they're gonna do, and which is a day that they're gonna spend. You know what we're gonna do? We're just gonna spend the next day drinking. And he explains all of it, but if you actually listen to every single line, it relates to a bit of the movie that's going to happen. And at the end, he says, "And back at the bar for shots." So they get back at the bar and they're actually shooting the zombies. Not a bit of smart.
Well, he also says we wake up with Bloody Marys.
Yes.
He says we woke up with Bloody Marys, and then in real life they wake up and there's, you know, a bloody zombie attack happening outside, and then
who's called
back to
Mary.
the bar for shots.
Yeah, the girl
Oh,
was
yeah,
named
yeah.
Mary.
That's right. I didn't catch that. Yeah. What's the middle thing? So he says Bloody Marys. He says something else, and then he says
I
back
can't
to the bar
remember.
for shots.
He says 3 or 4 things, but I just remember.
I didn't
back to
notice
the bar
that
for
though,
shots.
but you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. He's described what their day will actually be. That's very, very clever. That's fun.
It's so good. So they drink, and at that point they're so drunk, and they get out of the bar. They don't notice that there's zombies at this point. There's actually zombies running
They
around,
just see a couple where it looks like they're making out
or whatever. Yeah,
aggressively outside of the bar, and then as soon as they turn away, the guy's head literally rolls off his shoulders, you know, and hangs back. Yeah, it was. I was like, "Whoa, okay."
yeah. And there's
Here
a
we
bit where they
go.
sing the song, and they're going like da 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 da, and there's a song in the background. It's so good. So they go back home, and they're playing really loud music. It's electro, and Pete shows up and is really mad at them because it's 4 a.m. and they're making a huge mess, and they're being noisy, and he wants to sleep because he has work. And it turns out he's been bitten, and, you know, of course, foreshadowing for Pete becoming a zombie soon. Again, I can't keep saying this, but more foreshadowing. So Pete it sort of fights mostly with Ed, but also with Sean, because he says, "Oh, you're just living your life with this guy, just so is it easier for you to have somebody who's more of a loser than you, and that's the reason why you keep him around." And he says, "Ed, if you want to
burn.
live like an animal, go live in the shed." which is
a
what
great
Ed,
foreshadowing for the very end of the movie. Yes.
and even Ed's reply is, the next time I see him, he's dead. And
also great foreshadowing
Yeah,
to like
so
15 minutes from now.
At this
Yes.
point, it's like, is there any line in this movie that was not foreshadowing?
there's not. It's so smart.
Well, so and this scene ends with Sean drunkenly he plays the machine message from Liz, and then drunkenly goes to his whiteboard in the fridge and writes something down that we don't see till the next morning. And he writes down basically his plan, which is go around to Mom's, get Liz back, and get life together.
Out.
Sort your life out.
Sort your life out. So go around Mom's, get Liz back, sort life out, which happens to be exactly what he does in the zombie apocalypse in that order, which I also did not catch till the second time I watched this, which I was also very clever and very fun.
He wakes up, they both wake up hungover, and, you know, this is where we see the Cornetto scene. You want anything from the shop? Cornetto. And so Sean leaves the house, and we get the exact same long shot of him walking through the neighborhood to the shop. But this time, what we see in the background is not just people doing stuff, but zombies just running around, and he's just
and destruction,
completely oblivious to all of it. There's a man like just running away at full speed, and he just goes in that direction, not even noticing. And
it's
he
like a shattered windshield with a hole in the windshield that he doesn't notice at all. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like shopping carts
streaked
tipped
blood.
over.
Yeah.
And a lot of the zombies that you see in the background here are the same people that you saw from the previous long shot.
Yeah.
Now in their zombified forms.
The panhandler asking for change. He now it's a zombie. He doesn't even know it's a zombie now. Yeah, that's good stuff.
And so he gets into the shop and he slips on blood, and we don't see it. And this is the first scene where you see him kind of having a little moment of growth, where he's like, he goes and picks up a Coke and he looks at it and he's like, maybe I'll have a Coke Zero. So he gets the Coke Zero.
He gets a Diet Coke instead. Yeah, it's really good.
And he's like, "Hey, Nelson, Nelson, are you right? Whatever, I owe you 15p." So he walks back and gets back into the house. And as soon as he walks back into the house, there's Ed is just like standing at the window, and he's like, "There's a girl in the garden." And, you know, of course, this opens another of the funniest scenes in the movie, where this old sequence where there's this girl named Mary in the garden, and she's very obviously a zombie if you're an audience member. And you get this moment where she slowly turns around and looks into the camera, and then it cuts to them, and they seem shocked for a second. So like, oh, they're realizing, and they say, "Whoa, she's so drunk."
She's
and
so
they're convinced
drunk.
that she's just drunk. So they kind of have this little struggle with her, and at one point, Sean pushes her back, and she falls and impales herself. So they're shocked, but she starts getting up. And there's I think it's the only real CGI shot in the movie where you see through the hole in her stomach. And then it cuts back to them, and it's just like Ed reloading this old
particularly
camera.
When you're seeing the hole through her stomach, I actually think this is a really good shot, because the way the camera pans with her body moving is, first the hole centers on Ed's face, and then it centers on Sean's face, which I just think is a very, very clever way to shoot that gore.
So at that point, they kind of run back into the house and leave her out there, because there's also another zombie that shows up, and it's like, "Oh my god, what's going on?" It's like, "What shall we do? Have a sit down?" And they just sit in front of the TV. Now they're flipping through the TV channels, and every single TV says a little sentence, because they just flip through the TV channels. But for the audience, it's actually saying complete sentences about what's going on in the movie. And at one point, it's like, "Oh, and there is panic in the streets of London."
They flip the channel.
Yeah.
They flip the channel, and the new channel completes a sentence that was just flipped from on the previous channel. Yeah, it's good stuff.
It's amazing. And so at this point, they don't really know what to do. But a zombie, of course, Ed left the door open again. And the front door is open again, and they smash it. Yeah, funny scene. And the zombie shows up, and they just manage to kill it. And then it cuts back to the television, and it says, where there's this news broadcaster saying, removing the head or destroying the brain.
Removing the head or destroying the brain, yeah. That's how you defeat them.
And so you get the sequence in the actual garden where they use anything they can find to try to bash their heads in. And, I don't know, this scene...
End up throwing a bunch of records.
They choose some really bad weapons at first.
but because like they throw a record at one of the guys and it hits him in the head, they're like, all right, let's try this. Then they get out Sean's record collection, and I love the bit where they're going through them and deciding like which ones they can throw and which ones he wants to keep. That's just really funny.
I forget which one it was, but Ed says one, and then Sean replies, "I liked it.
I like it." And another one is like, "Oh, that's Liz's. Well, but she did dump you," and he throws it. And the other one is like, "Oh, the Batman soundtrack," and he's like, "Throw it." So eventually they break into the shed that they had never opened for some reason, and they pick up a cricket bat and like
a shovel
or whatever, and they use it to kill the zombies. And then we get this kind of violent scene where they're just like stomping down on the zombies and repeatedly bashing them through the head, and then it is another jump cut to them again sitting down in the living room where Sean is just having a cup of tea and Ed is eating his cornetto, which again, another one of those great
You've got red on you.
You've got red on you again.
No, this time it's blood, though, not a pen.
It is blood.
But, so then they have the sit down here, and this is where they decide what they're going to do.
Yes, this is where first they phone Liz and Barbara. Barbara is Sean's mum. We referenced it before, but I think that the phone conversation where he just doesn't care that it was Philip who was bitten is really funny.
Yes.
And even the fact that Ed obviously really loves Barbara as well, and he just shouts, "We're coming to get you, Barbara!" It's so great. And then we get the famous plan montage sequence.
This is my favorite part of the movie, I think.
And again, one of the more iconic shots from this movie, at least in my mind, is the way the plan ends. And I have that up on the screen right now if you're watching the video.
It's so good. And the fact that they're able to repeat the little montage sequence, I think it's 3 or 4 times.
3 times, yeah.
It gets funnier and funnier every time. They're able to do it in a way that the sentences get shorter, so it's still funny even the third time. Is fantastic. So they do go over to Barbara's place, and the plan was to kill Philip, but Sean goes in by himself, and he's just not able to do it because Philip is still conscious. He's not actually turned into a zombie. Another of the funniest lines in the movie where he's like, "Oh, I'm quite all right, Barbara. I ran it under a cold tap." Which is just
such a British thing to say.
It really is. I don't want to be a bother to the doctor. So they get back out and they have to go to Liz's, but Ed has crashed Pete's car, which is the car that they took to get there, and they happen to have to take the Jag, which is Philip's car. So they jump into the car. They go over to Liz's. He this time, and again showing more growth. He rings the bell. They don't answer, but this time he's able to climb through the window, which he wasn't before. And it's another little moment where they show that he's growing. He's becoming more capable, at least. And they get back into the car with Liz, and this is the first time that he presents Liz to his mum, which is another one of the sticking points at the beginning of the movie. And then, unfortunately, Philip dies because they also were attacked by zombies again. So Philip was bitten a second time in the neck. And, as you said, Grizz, this is
it's a really nice moment.
The most heartwarming moment in the movie, probably.
Yeah,
except for the end, maybe.
Except for there's one more moment at the end that I think is more heartwarming. But I just love this moment where Philip, kind of says, "Look, I know I was, hard on you, and I wasn't, but I was trying. I wanted to be a good role model for you." And just that moment, is very important for Sean because this is one of those growth moments where Sean, realizes that people are complicated, and even though he had a tumultuous relationship with Philip, because of this conversation going forward, his entire outlook on his entire life with Philip has changed. So it's one of, like I said, one of the more heartwarming moments. I definitely,
Yeah, I mean, it's one of 2 moments in the movie with real emotional honesty, maybe 2 or 3 moments, but it's it's really effective, and Bill Nighy's great in it. Even though they're cramped in the back of a small car, it still it plays well.
And again,
but then it's immediately undercut because he immediately becomes a zombie, right after that, and they pile out of the small car.
I think they're so good at keeping the heartwarming moment just the right amount of time for the joke to be funny. They choose the exact perfect timing for him to say, "Oh, Mum, Philip's gone. He's dead. And she's like, no, he's not. He's sitting right there. And they cut back to him and he's become a zombie. So
Yeah, that was good.
It's good. And so they, again, he's become a zombie. And so they have to get out of the car. They have to quickly, leave the car because of course, he's inside. And from here on out, they're on foot and they have to find a way to the pub walking. Another great little moment is when he's like, he's talking to his mum and he says, Mum, like the man you love, there's nothing left of him inside the car. But he does turn off the music that he'd been complaining about for the whole car ride. It's another great little moment. So at this point, they're on foot. They're kind of walking through back alleys and backyards to get to the pub without having to be on the main road because they don't want to meet other zombies. And here we get one of the running gags that will be in all three movies of the Cornetto trilogy, where Shaun is standing in front of like a bit of a fence, and he says, what's the matter, David? You've never taken a shortcut before? And he goes to hop the fence, but the fence breaks and he just falls flat on his face. Great visual gag. And this one comes
up again in the next one. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes back again in both Hot Fuzz and in The World's End. And they play with it. I don't know if you remember this, Grizz, but it's so funny.
In Hot Fuzz? Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, it's perfect for both of these sequences because, they're both movies that are sort of spoofing action and so this is perfect because, he's finally starting to get his act together and he's feeling himself a little bit, and then the overconfidence causes him to come crashing down, both literally and figuratively. I love it.
It's like
we
go ahead.
Doppelgangers too. We didn't talk about the doppelgangers.
Yes.
He runs into Yvonne, Deus Ex Yvonne, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna go head to get the army or something," which again sounds like a very sensible adult thing to do.
And they ask what he's doing.
I'm going to the pub.
And she's like,
but then
the pub.
Yeah, but then every person in Yvonne's crew perfectly matches with someone in Sean's crew, which is really funny, and they all pat each other and acknowledge each other, and it's a great gag. So
at this point, they're very close to the pub, but they run into this old man who's been zombified, and they fight him. They're able to defeat him, but unfortunately, Barbara, Sean's mum, we don't see it, but she was bitten, and so this will.
And she doesn't tell anyone because she doesn't.
She doesn't tell anyone because she doesn't want to be a bother.
She doesn't want Sean to worry.
And so we get another really funny sequence for me where Diane, who is an actress, or an acting teacher or whatever they say in the movie, she's like teaching them to do the zombie kind of I don't know,
to act like zombies.
Act like zombies, because their plan is to kind of walk through the zombies acting like them so they won't eat them alive and get to the pub. And you get this really funny exchange between Ed and Sean, where Ed is like, "Ed, let's see yours," and he's like, smokes a cigarette.
I do it on the night.
No, I do it on the night. Oh, come on, you got to try it. And he's like, "Oh, all right, let's see yours. Who made you fucking kill all the zombies?" And like, Simon Pegg does a really good zombie impression, and Ed's like, "Oh, that's pretty good.
All right,
that's pretty good."
And again, okay, so, and Diane goes, "Okay, let's try it all together. 1, 2, 3, hard cut to them actually doing it in the street against the zombies.
As they walk among the zombies, yeah.
Yeah.
And it works for a while.
It does work, but it obviously shouldn't, because it's like really funny where the camera moves in front of all of them, so we hear all the different versions of their kind of zombie voice or whatever, and when it gets to Barbara, she's just doing ooh. They get to the bar, and once again Ed messes everything up because his phone is on and he just answers the phone while the zombies are just standing there looking at them and waiting for them to eat. And
they're trying to be inconspicuous. They're trying to get into the pub inconspicuously, and then his phone goes off. He starts talking, alerting all the zombies to their presence, basically.
Yes. And this is the first time that we see Sean actually stand up to Ed, because he's always, leave him alone. That's just the way
he's always apologized for him and defended him. Yeah, but this time
he's had enough.
Lets him have it.
Yeah. So he gets mad at him. But in the meantime, they turn around and all of the zombies are looking at them. And I think this is a one of the prettiest shots in the movie, where the camera just pans around and you just see this still shot of all the zombies looking into the camera. Like, it's really well composed and well made. This movie is visually, we said it's very smart in the way that it uses visual, but I think it looks way more expensive than it actually is, because only $6 million budget, but it looks great. What happens is David panics and uses a trash can to destroy one of the windows of the pub. They do get into the pub, but Shaun kind of runs away with all of the zombies, which is really stupid because he's like just jumps in the middle of them, and for some reason they don't catch him. But he runs away with all the zombies to draw them away, and they all enter the pub. Eventually he does come back, but in the meantime they've been fighting with David, and David's like, so what, even if he comes back, do you think his plan is going to amount to anything more than just sitting in the dark and eating peanuts? And so he comes back, and there's this big hero shot of him coming back and grabbing a peanut.
Catching it out of the air.
Catching out of the air that David was throwing, and there's a funny exchange with David where he's like, oh, you're just here to protect your boyfriend. And he's like, he's not my boyfriend. And Ed hands him a beer, and he's like, thanks, babe. And he gives him a little wink.
It's good stuff.
Just another great joke. And then they do end up just sitting in the dark, eating peanuts.
And drinking.
And drinking. But here is where, at some point, the lights from the streets come up, so they realize, oh, the power actually isn't out. Maybe we could reset the breakers and watch some television, at least, so we're not just sitting here, and maybe we can understand what's actually going on. So Shaun goes into the cellar, or not in the cellar, but in sort of a side room, and resets the breakers and notices that outside there is a bunch of zombies. So the zombies have actually followed him to the pub, back to the pub. So he comes back and he goes to Liz and he's like, look, I messed up. The zombies did follow me. We're going to have to be really quiet because otherwise they might come in. And the second he says that, Ed uses one of the slot machines and wins, and it does this really loud noise. So at that point, all hell breaks loose. The owner of the pub, who they've talked about before in the movie, shows up, and he's become a zombie, and he's kind of this mini boss. For some reason, he seems to be much stronger than all the other zombies.
Very durable.
The jukebox starts playing "Don't Stop Me Now" by Queen, and is like, oh, what the fuck is that? And it's like, oh, it's on random, which is another joke that came back from a scene before. And we get another, I think, maybe not the most iconic, but one of the most iconic sequences in the movie, where there's Queen playing in the background with "Don't Stop Me Now," and Shaun is like, David, kill the Queen. And he's like, what? The jukebox? And we get this like big fight against the zombified owner of the pub, where they are hitting him with what they call
Liz, Ed, and Shaun all have pool cues, hitting him in time with the music. Yes,
in rhythm with the music, which is if you listen to interviews, is actually that scene is where Edgar Wright got the idea for doing a whole action movies in rhythm with music.
I was going to say that about Baby Driver.
Yeah, this is a precursor to Baby Driver, and God, this scene is just it's so good.
Well, and also, like, a similar thing to Baby Driver is the long opening sequence where he's walking to the store is, again, the exact same thing that they do at the beginning of Baby Driver.
They do that. Yeah, absolutely.
It is very similar.
It is very fun to see. I love when directors, like, pull some things thematically from their own movies and do them again in other ones.
Copy themselves.
They copy themselves, and they imp it a little bit. Just change it up just enough to keep it fresh. Yeah, but I think the sequence is very funny because they're absolutely just beating the crap out of this guy with these pool cues, and it is doing nothing.
What also happens right after the scene is that they pick up the gun, and Shaun is like, they've had this conversation where it was like, oh, Big Al said so. The gun is actually a real gun. And Shaun says, oh, yeah, but Big Al also says dogs can't look up. So obviously that's not true. So he picks up the gun and he goes to use it he just using it uses it as a bat to kill the zombie. But then Ed says, "Oh, why didn't you just shoot him?" And he said, "Of course, like I've told you, it doesn't work." And the gun
Accidentally
goes
shoots
off,
the gun.
and it turns out that the gun. And Ed is like, "I fucking knew it."
But dogs can look up.
But dogs can look up.
And that is Chekhov's gun going off. Set up in the first act, going off in the third act.
Very, very literally.
Yes.
So again, we get the scene where Shaun is shooting the zombies that are coming in through the window at this point because they've made such a ruckus that the zombies are coming from everywhere. And when he shoots the gun, you have Ed behind his shoulder, and he says the exact same lines of dialogue that Shaun said to Ed while he was playing the video game at the beginning of the movie. So another
calling out
reload, aim
the
upper left.
Yeah.
Yes.
And after that, we get Barbara's death scene, which
this is a moment that I almost tear up.
Yeah, absolutely heartbreaking. Where she's been bitten, so she knows she's turning, but she doesn't want to be a botherer, so she doesn't say anything.
She first reveals it to Liz,
Yes.
right? That she's been bitten, and then Shaun sees, and then they have this emotional, reckoning the two of them, and then she dies, and then David grabs the gun and is about to shoot Shaun's mom, and Shaun does not want him to, even though she's about to become a zombie, and then does become a zombie, and he still does not want David to shoot her, and he has to go through this,
gut-wrenching
this
decision.
moment where, this gut-wrenching decision of, he's been very childlike throughout the movie and relying maybe a little bit too much on his mom, and then the scene where he has to grow up very quickly and kill the child and himself and shoot his mom in the head and become an adult. And it's hard to do, but he does it. But it, like you said, Grizz, this is very emotional. It's a very, again, emotionally honest scene.
Yeah. Also, I think the scariest scene in the movie as well, because there's this close-up of the mum just looking at them, but then she does sort of a growl as a zombie, and it is the only moment in the movie that kind of made me tense up a little bit, because it's kind of, it reminded me a little bit of Bilbo Baggins in Lord of the Rings, the first one.
Yeah.
Where he has that one moment
where he lashes out at Frodo about the ring. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's scary is it's a familiar character that you trust, and then that familiar character is suddenly scary.
And not just familiar, but one they've set up the character as very friendly, loving, caring, and then snap, and she's a zombie and she's going to kill you.
Yes.
But right before they shoot her, they also have really funny jokes as well, because David comes and points the gun at her, and so Shaun kind of breaks a glass and he points it at his neck, and Ed does it too, and Liz is like, "Ed, don't exacerbate things," which is and Ed is like, "What does exacerbate mean?" Which is again Ed isn't growing, he isn't listening and growing. Well, Shaun has learned the word because he said it before. It's funny little elements.
And then I also like the I forget her name, David's girlfriend,
Diane.
Di says, This doesn't seem fair, and then Ed's like, "Oh, you're right," and then hands her the glass so that she holds a glass at Shaun.
Yeah. Right after this, this is kind of the payoff of their character dynamics as well, because this is when it becomes clear that David was really in love with Liz, but Liz had rejected him, so that's why he ended up with Diane. And that's why he hates Shaun. He hates Shaun, and he's always so antagonistic because Shaun is with Liz, so he's really just jealous. And they have this little interaction, and he falls on the floor and uses the gun to shoot Shaun, although the gun didn't have they just reloaded or whatever. They didn't have a shot in it. It wasn't loaded, and so at this point, all the
cards on the table at that point. He just tried to kill Shaun basically and
failed. And he's kind of just embarrassed at that point, and he starts leaving, and he's just
backing away,
and then Diane intervenes, and he's starting to say, "Oh, Shaun, actually, I'm sorry." And this is where we get the goriest scene in the movie, because the zombies open the main door, and they pull him out. And they just rip him apart.
They disembowel him. Disembowel him really graphically, while he's still alive, and it's hard to watch. And then Di kind of they try to pull him back, but his legs rip off again.
Yeah, and she ends up with a leg.
And she basically runs out to her death to try to inadvisedly save David, even though he's already dead.
I mean, she's lost.
So then,
she's lost all reason at this point.
So then it's just Liz, Sean, and Ed left, and they go behind the bar.
I did want to shout out one thing here in this scene, where it's not just like that they break in through the door, but they're also breaking in through the windows and everything.
Yeah.
And this is the most homage to Day of the Dead, George Romero. That's a big moment in Day of the Dead, where the zombies break through the windows of the house they're staying in that movie. So I mean, a lot of it, obviously George Romero pioneered the zombie genre, so a lot of it's going to be riffing off of things that he had done, but that was one of the more striking visual homages to me.
Yeah, and even the disembowelment is very similar to a scene in Dawn of the Dead where they just rip apart a person in seconds. Right before they jump behind the bar, we get the scene where Pete shows up again. There's just naked Peter Serafinowicz shows up as a zombie, and there's the final payoff of, I said leave him alone, and he shoots him in the head. And Ed, unfortunately, gets bitten. So they hide behind the bar, and then they find the trapdoor that goes to the cellar. And they're, at this point, they're sitting in the cellar. They only have 2 shots left in the gun. And Ed is kind of bleeding out and has been bitten by the zombie, so he's going to turn anyway. And they have this really cute, I think, heart-to-heart between Sean and Liz, where they're just saying... maybe you should do it. Sean says, maybe you should do it, Liz, because they're talking about killing themselves. Maybe you should do it because otherwise in the same day I'd have shot my mum, my best friend, and one of my best friends and my girlfriend.
My flatmate.
She's like, what makes you think I've took you back? And he's like, I mean, do you want to die single? You don't want to die single, do you?
Oh, by the way, I just want to correct myself. It was Night of the Living Dead, not Day of the Dead.
Right, yes.
For George Romero.
The first one.
Yes.
Fair enough.
We don't fact check. We're a podcast. I don't know why you did that.
That I'm Mr. Not a horror guy, and one of the horror movies I've seen is Night of the Living Dead, and I messed up the title, so I felt like a dummy.
There you go. Another little funny thing, while Liz and Sean are talking about killing themselves, and they're kind of reuniting definitively, even though throughout the movie, while they're fighting the zombies and all that stuff, you do get the idea that they're kind of getting close again, but they're finally deciding to get back together right before killing themselves. And in the background, you can hear Ed saying, "Oh, I don't mind being eaten," and they keep going with the conversation, and he's like, "Actually, I'd like to be shot as well." You just hear him from the outside. And at this point, though, they have a final cigarette just right before they die. And as she turns on the lighter, she notices that they're sitting on kind of a little, what do you call it? An industrial lift.
Yeah.
That will get them outside. And so they leave the gun to Ed, and we get this very heartwarming last moment between Ed and Sean, where they're just saying goodbye because Ed is going to die in the situation, and they do the "I'll stop doing with you, stop laughing" joke again because he's like, "I'm sorry, Sean," but this time good old fart joke. But this time he's like, "I'm not laughing," and you have this really quiet shot where they're just sitting there head to head and saying goodbye forever as best friends, and I think that's another really heartwarming moment. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
No, I agree. Yeah,
it's great.
Another good moment there. Not to me, it's not as heartwarming as
the mom,
or as Philip, because we've set it up that Ed has been a drag on Sean for the entire movie, and Ed has not stopped being a drag.
Yeah. Actually, I think this is probably maybe best for Sean.
Yeah.
The fact that Ed's no longer in his life anymore, to be perfectly honest. Yeah.
And look, as we'll see later, Ed got what he wanted too, kind of, because he's just going to sit around and play video games all day. So anyway, Ed is left behind, and they use the lift, they get out, and they kind of, again, they just have an axe and some chains, so maybe they'll survive, but not really. And then Yvonne shows up again with the army and saves them.
Deus Ex Yvonne.
Deus Ex Yvonne again. So we jump back, I think, 6 months, and we're back in the original house where Ed, Pete, and Sean lived. But now it's all cleaned up, cleaned up. It looks really good. And Liz and Shaun are living there. And they from the few lines of dialogue that we get between them, they kind of met each other in the middle, where Shaun is a little more grown up and a little more, oh, we are going to do some different things sometimes. We're not just going to go to the pub. But Liz is also kind of met him in the middle in the idea that she's not as demanding as she was before. And a lot of that demand came from maybe the influence of David and Di. So they kind of met in the middle and have a very cute, healthy relationship at this point. At least it seems in the movie. And the final scene, first of all, we get another TV scene where the zombies have kind of been integrated into British society.
Yeah,
which is very funny.
Including the kid who worked at the electronics shop with
Yes.
Shaun, who kind of now he's just a zombie pushing shopping carts around.
Correct.
Again, a callback to the opening credits, basically. And I also like that when Liz and Shaun are sitting there, they go through their plan for the day.
Yes.
Which again is a callback to their plan earlier, which I thought was really nice.
I love the game show where the zombies are trying to grab. I don't know what, they don't show what they're trying to grab. I assume it's some sort of
a meat,
meat of some kind. But they're playing against bungee cords, and everyone's just laughing hysterically at them. It's so funny.
And so Shaun says, actually, before we do any of that, they laid out the plan for the day. I'm just going to pop into the shed for a few minutes. And she's like, go on then. So he goes into the shed, picks up a controller for the PS2, and you hear the dialogue go, player 2 has entered the game. And the camera kind of zooms back, and you see Ed, who's just chained inside the shed as a zombie, playing video games all day. And the end is just them two, him as a zombie and Shaun as, Shaun playing video games together, and You're My Best Friend plays by Queen, and that's the end of the movie.
Yes. Roll credits.
Roll credits.
And again, another great music choice, You're My Best Friend, right at the end. It just leaves you on a happy note. The whole movie, despite being so bloody and gory and kind of all over the place, it's really heartwarming for me. And it's
a very happy movie.
Right?
Despite all the circumstances. I think that's brilliant.
So that's the whole plot for Shaun of the Dead. As you can tell, I remember all of the little lines and stupid things, and I love this movie to death. I cannot stop thinking about it when I watch it. Anytime I watch it, I'm predicting what they're going to do and laughing before they do it. I absolutely adore this film. I don't know. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we rank it?
I just,
great flick.
It's
really
a great
enjoyable.
movie. I'm glad that you wanted to watch it because I know how much it means to you as one of your favorite movies. But I'm also glad that it's an opportunity for me to watch it again because it's a movie that I didn't give a fair shot when it came out. So I like that now that I've seen it a couple of times, I can say that it's easily my favorite zombie movie by far.
I'm a Zombieland kind of guy myself.
I did like Zombieland as well.
I really like Zombieland. Yeah.
Basically, the lesson learned here is if you're going to make me watch a zombie movie, better make it funny.
Make it a comedy.
Make it funny, yeah. And, it seems that Edgar Wright may be kind of getting back to his horror roots a little bit with his upcoming Last Night in Soho, which is why the whole reason we're talking about Shaun of the Dead, because the trailer dropped a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and
it looks really, really good.
It does look really good, and I'm now in this, internal conflict because I have loved the Edgar Wright movies I've seen, and even a horror movie like Shaun of the Dead, but I just don't know if Last Night in Soho is going to be funny,
I doubt it.
The trailer didn't show us much. Mm-hmm. It didn't have any dialogue in it, basically. It was more visuals and music, but it didn't have many gags in the trailer. It was mostly just kind of thriller and horror imagery.
Yeah, and Edgar Wright has said that major inspirations for that movie are movies by Nicholas Roeg, is that how you pronounce it? Who made Don't Look Now and some old directorless movies like Repulsion and Rosemary's Baby. So the movie is going to be a horror film. I think he said I wanted to do something that isn't comedy, because even Baby Driver is an action movie, but has a lot of comedic elements. And I think he specifically said, I want to do something that isn't necessarily a comedy.
Not many laughs in Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, no. I'm sure this movie will have a few jokes, just because I think his wit in the way that he writes things will come through. but it is going to be a horror thriller movie. So,
And I think I will force myself to go watch it because I like Edgar Wright.
You have to at this point. I'm really excited for it. I hope it's great. I mean, it's been delayed at this point 2 years because it was supposed to come out in early 2020. So that didn't work out. But anyway, looking forward to it. Hopefully it's good. Where would you guys rank this movie? You know where I'd put it? It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I have a hard time separating myself from that. So it would be number one on my list, I guess. But so
let's
you
go
guys
through the top 10.
You guys are really going to have to decide. So at number 10, we have Your Name. Number 9, The Thing, John Carpenter. At number 8, Bicycle Thieves. At number 7, Chinatown. At number 6, we have Lawrence of Arabia. At number 5, Network. 4, Boogie Nights. 3, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. 2, Citizen Kane. And 1, The Silence of the Lambs. So it is really up to you guys.
I'm going to let Josh go first.
This is not in the top 10 for me. I'm sorry to say.
Okay.
So this is probably going to come down to Grizz.
It is also not in my top 10.
Okay. So,
I'm shattered.
first of all, I apologize, Hugo.
Nah,
Sincerely
it's fine.
apologize.
We get it.
But also, this is, I brought this up when we were ranking. I don't know what it was, but I said, like, what if you guys have something at 12 and I have it at 1? The fact that I have it at 1 doesn't weight any more the fact than if I had it at 10.
Right.
It will
it
when we do our re-ranking.
It will when we do the re-ranking in a few episodes, and that's why I don't feel bad not putting in my top 10 now, because I know that we're gonna quote unquote fix our list
Sure.
a little bit.
You don't have to feel bad. It's my favorite movie.
Well,
so you have to-
I know, but I can't help it. I like you guys. I want to make you happy.
Yeah. if I start from the bottom and move up, I don't know if it makes it past like Jackie Brown or Mank. However, if I start from the top and move down,
yes,
I could defensively put it like at number 12 behind The Departed.
Yeah. I mean, like there are some movies that are currently in our top 10 that I like this better than, but there are ones that are no longer in the top 10 that I definitely like more. So I in this case I decided, for me I would probably put it at number. It would be number 13. I'd have it ahead of Sound of Metal.
I have it at 12. I haven't seen The Wind Rises, so I have it at 12 behind The Departed, so one spot above Grizz.
So you would be
is that where it goes?
It would go there, yes.
So I think the important thing to note here is that before we do our re-rank episode, Josh needs to watch The Wind Rises.
I guess I do.
Oh yeah, that's true. That is true.
I'm currently, not to plug another podcast, I'm currently listening to Blank Check, the Miyazaki episode, so maybe that would be a reason for me to watch The Wind Rises among the other Miyazaki movies,
So what are we doing next week?
Wait, what are we? Okay, yeah, that's it. I forgot what we started first. Next we're going to be talking about Paddington 2 and Paddington 1, but mostly Paddington 2, because it recently was unseated as the top movie on Rotten Tomatoes very shortly after taking the crown of highest rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes.
Which is a shame.
Let's talk about it. Yeah, I'm excited. I haven't seen Paddington 2, and it's,
It's such a good
among
movie.
the best movies ever made, apparently. So I'm excited to see it.
I've seen both the Paddington movies before, and I'm very happy to rewatch them.
Yes.
Cool.
Put everybody in a good mood. Paddington.
Yes. I love him.
Just
Obviously,
pure
if you're an audio listener, I had my little Paddington plush on camera now that I had as a kid. My mum is British, very obviously. And
Hugo likes to pretend he's not British, but
I had a little Paddington that I slept with. So I dug him up just to do a little
As a
gag on the
prop.
episode.
a visual gag in the vein of Edgar Wright.
So where can we find you guys?
You can find me on Twitter at BroshJadley, and you can find my YouTube channel, Moves I Love, and so can you.
And you can find me on Twitter at GoodGameGrizz, on Twitch at GoodGameGrizz, and also on the Pop XP YouTube channel, where we talk about a variety of things, including what's new in movies and TV and comic books and video games and all that. And then also check out my Pokemon podcast that I do with my buddy Dustin, Podcat Monsters.
And you can find me on Twitter at Hugo_Pinay, and please follow me on letterboxd at I think you could just write Hugo Pinay and you'll find me there.
And follow the podcast at RTF_pod.
And follow the podcast at RTF_pod. That's very important. Also, I had a successful movie tweet and RTF_pod didn't retweet it. So I'm just saying. So
I believe you have the login to the Twitter account as well as me and Grizz, Hugo. So
that's fair.
you could retweet it yourself.
That's a fair point.
That's all I
a
ever
fair
do.
point.
So
That is a fair point. So thanks for listening, and we hope to see you next week. Bye.
bye.